Hello, I'm Val and welcome to my channel, and today what I'm going to show you are some lover's eye charms that I've been making. They're little fabric charms and they're based on some pieces of jewellery that until the middle of last week I didn't even know existed. Now I've since done a little bit of research, I've got my notes here, and these are charms that are based on a short-lived craze that happened in Georgian England, and it was among the upper classes of society, so your aristocrats and royalty. And it was a craze for having pieces of jewellery on which was represented a painting of their lover's eye, or their beloved's eye, the person they adored, whoever it was. And these were items of jewellery that were popular from around about, say, 1790 to 1820, something like that. If you can hear sound in the background, I apologise. Outside there is a vehicle coming past which is cleaning the drains at the side of the road. Oh, and it is stopping pretty much directly outside my house. Move on, move on. Yeah, it's going. So, anyway, back to the subject in hand. So, these were miniatures and they were often painted on ivory or vellum, and they might be watercolours, and they would be a piece of jewellery which might be a ring or a brooch or a pendant, and a portrait of the eye was central to them. And they had often the eye was surrounded by, say, rubies, diamonds, pearls, really precious pieces of jewellery. And you could wear these openly. You could tell people who your beloved was and whose eye it was that was represented, or you could have them secretly, hidden under a lapel, or you could just not tell people whose eye it was, or you could, keep the jewellery in your jewellery box and just you would know about them. And one famous example of these lover's eye charms was commissioned by, let me look at my notes, the Prince of Wales, who later became George IV, King George IV. And in 1785, he commissioned a miniature of his eye, and he gave it to his mistress, who was an actress called Maria Fitzherbert. And she later had a piece of jewellery commissioned for him and sent it to him. Now, we all know that eyes are supposed to be the windows of the soul, and so they can be symbolic in that apparently the eye could mean different things depending on how it was represented. So if you had a raised eyebrow, that could indicate surprise or excitement. If the eye was half closed, that could mean, say, secrecy or indicate intimacy. So I learnt about these through this craft session that I go to each month, this craft group, and there was an artist leading it, and she explained about these eyes, and she was doing a project based on these charms, and she got us to make some. This isn't the best example in the world. It's a 2-hour session, so there's a limit to how much you can do in the session, and this was what I made, partly in the session and partly at home, where I finished it off. And we were given some pieces of canvas, some offcuts of canvas, which already had acrylic paint on them. And we had to choose what shape we used, because these objects came in different shapes and sizes. I chose rather a large shape. It should have been I think it should have been small. It would have looked better. But we had lots of beads there, so we could surround our charm with beads. Whichever colour canvas we'd chose, we could have coordinating beads or a total mix of them, whatever we wanted to do. And then the idea was that we took them home with us and we painted an eye in the centre. Well, I'm not really good at painting and drawing, and I'm happier stitching. So I got out the felt and I made an eye out of white felt. There's grey. I think that's not black felt, that's embroidery thread. And I used embroidery thread for the stem stitching for the eyelashes. So that was my first go at making a charm based on these Georgian lover's eye charms. And that's the back if you want to see the back. So it's backed with felt. And I decided that I'd have a go at making some, but slightly differently. Because I didn't want to paint the eye on, then there wasn't a reason to use canvas to stitch into. So I decided to use fabric instead. And I went for fabrics that are a bit more luxurious. So this is a plum-coloured velvet. A while ago, I found a pair of really beautiful trousers, Bowden trousers, in a charity shop. and they were in this plum coloured velvet, and unfortunately they didn't fit me. They were too baggy around the hips and the waist. Otherwise I would have loved to wear them, but I have cut them up and used the material for different things. And I decided to make this one in the shape of a heart. So I had a great fun beading this. I got out my bead tin, which is in this cookie tin here, and just used anything and everything I could find just to make this really pretty surround. And I've got an earring on there. I don't think I ever had a second earring that matched that. I don't know where that came from, but yeah. And that's the back of it, if you want to see. And I did really enjoy making that and choosing all the beads and coming up with a colour scheme. And that, once I know how to do something, I do tend to keep going. So I made another one, which is a kind of a dusty, I don't know what you call that, a petrol blue, would you? Dusty blue. Anyway, it's got, obviously there's a blue theme to it with the beads going around the edges. That is also a bit of earring. I think that was a clip-on earring, and the back broke off that. Oh, there's the council cleaning people going past again, if you can hear that noise. Well, at least they're making sure the drains in the street are nice and clean, and all the gutters. So yeah, that's the second one I made. I think that's quite a good size as well. It's as you can see, it's a better size than that original one. But yeah, I was happy with that one. And then I had to go, I really love this. I love this colour. I definitely, I go for these kind of raspberry, blackberry, those kind of purple red sort of colours on that side of the colour wheel. That was a scarf. It was a really beautiful scarf, but it just wasn't quite long enough to be practical. I never wore it, so it got cut up in the end. So otherwise it just would have stayed in the wardrobe and I'd have done nothing with it, never worn it. So I made another heart, and it looked really good, I think, with just the gold beads around. There were seed beads and tiny gold sequins, and I think those tube ones are called bugle beads, are they? I think so. There's another eye with some eyelashes. The eyelashes on there don't show up that well because they're brown on that plum colour. They show up better on here. There we go. Yep, and I made another one because I really do like to just repeat things when I make them and just see how differently I can make them. This one, this is really nice sort of shiny blue material, and if you Google these lover's eye charms, you'll see that some of them had pearls surrounding them. Well, I don't have pearls, but I do have these sort of pearly kind of buttons. So I sewed those around, and that little star-shaped sequin is there because I tried to get the eye an equal distance from either side, and I couldn't quite get it right. So I just sewed that little star there to kind of disguise the fact that it's a bit too far to the left, that eye. There we go. So I wanted to explain how these are made, and they are really easy, and you can make one in over a day or over a couple of evenings. And what you'll need is some nice material for the top layer of your charm. So that's a bit of black velvet. That's from a skirt that I cut up. That's from that scarf that I also cut up. I do cut up a lot of sort of clothes. I tend to buy things in charity shops really cheaply, because if you want nice material, things like silk or velvet or anything, linen, then it can be really cheap to buy it from a charity shop. You can find sometimes hideous looking items of clothing, but if you cut them up, you can harvest a huge amount of nice material from them. And you can use stretchy material. I didn't think I would be able to get away with it at first, but you can do that. And you'll also need some felt. So this is a project where you can use some of this cheap felt, the really not very good quality stuff, or you can use the better quality, which is nicer to use. But sometimes you have this cheap stuff that just needs using up. And what you can do, either you can just draw your design freehand on the back of the fabric, Or, oops, let me just get that out of the way. Or you can just make yourself a little paper template. So decide what size and shape you want for your charm. Cut out your top layer of material, and then you need either 2 or 3 layers of felt on the back. And it kind of depends how sturdy you want this to be. Maybe you want to eventually put a brooch pin on the back. So it can be quite sort of flexible, or it can be quite sturdy depending on how many layers. So either 2 or 3 layers of felt, see what you feel like. And then you're just going to sew your layers together. And what I do is just a running stitch along the inside edge, just to sandwich those 3 layers together. And then let me find among this jumble. What I do after that is just get embroidery thread. I use 2 strands and just do a blanket stitch all the way around the edge. You can do that in the same colour as your top fabric. You could do it in a contrasting colour. It just makes sure that everything is secure together, and then it's not going to fray anymore. It just looks a bit neater, I think. It looks neater on the back. And then what you're going to do is get hold of your beads. So if you've got a nice selection of beads, that's good. If you haven't got lots of beads, obviously you can buy packs of beads on eBay or wherever. Charity shops are also a good source of beads, because you could buy really cheap costume jewellery from them. And sometimes the necklaces or bracelets or whatever are really hideous. But if you look at the beads rather than the style of the necklace, you can sometimes get some really pretty beads. And especially necklaces that are made up of seed beads. It's a really cheap way to buy thousands of seed beads, just to buy a single necklace. So you're just going to decide what you want in the way of beads, or buttons, if you want to surround your eye with buttons, and just do a border all around. And that is just quite a really nice thing to do, just selecting different beads. You can get some different sizes and shapes of beads, and I think when you're doing this, it's quite easy to see that you don't want a bead that's too big. So with this, I don't think you'd want that bead on there particularly, because it would just stand out too much, the size of it. So yeah, you can be quite creative with your selection of beads, and you can choose just one colour if you want. If you want to go for, say, that gold look, or you can just use a colour scheme like with this blue one. And when you've done that, when you've got your beads around the outside, it is just getting scraps of felt and then just making your eye. So just cutting out an oval, yes, of white felt, and then your little piece of coloured felt for the eye there, the black in the centre, and that little, just 2 or 3 stitches of white embroidery thread there. They just bring the eye to life, really. They just add a bit of something to it, a little spark. So there's my eye charms. And if you're wondering what to do with these, you can make them into brooches. So you could put a little brooch pin on the back of there, or you could add that to the front of an art journal. You could sew it onto a bag as a patch. If you made a little one, you could have it, depending on the shape and the size of it, you could have it hanging on the side of a journal. You know how you have like a long thread with, oh, hang on, let me just, yeah, so if you had something like that, you could have that hanging down. And if you're worried that the back of it looks a bit messy, I mean, you could always cover that up if it was something where the back would be seen. You could just get a piece of felt, like a heart shape, slightly smaller than this, and sew that onto the back, or even fabric glue it down if you wanted to. So there's my eye charms. And the other, before I forget, the other idea I had for them, I've been making these fabric baskets lately and having a lot of fun with these, and mainly making them with patterned material, textured material. And I thought it would be really good to make one out of a piece of black velvet. Did I have a piece of velvet here? Yeah, here it is. Because you can make one of these baskets out of the velvet. Let me spread this on here. And then these would look really dramatic on top. So if you had these going across the sides of the basket, they could look really good. Ooh, there we go. Get them in the frame. And what else did I have? Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. So I think I will have a go at making one of these baskets because they're really easy. So if I make this out of this black material and then have these on the sides going around, I think they'd look really good. So anyway, those are my charms based on the Georgian Lover's Eye charms. And I would recommend you Google those to see the original version of those, because they are really beautiful and they're rather quirky and a bit odd, but they're fun. So I hope this video made sense. I'm not the greatest person at explaining how to do things. So if there's anything you're not sure of, then just put it in the comments. And I'll watch this video back and see if it makes sense, vaguely makes sense. If it does, I'll post it, and if it doesn't, well, I'll redo it. So there's my charms, and I hope you enjoy this video, and thank you for watching, and you're welcome to leave a comment. Thanks very much. Bye bye.